Today we're going to look at another concept when it comes to teamwork and teams, and that's cohesiveness. What makes a team unified? What makes them strong? You know, when you go and watch maybe a football game, you see how each one knows his part in that team performance and how each one's part is important. That doesn't come overnight. There has to be a bond, there has to be a level of trust, and these are the things that we call cohesion. So today, let's take a look at these concepts as we continue on with leading teams. Okay, today we're carrying on with Chapter 10, Leading Teams, and today we're going to be looking primarily at team cohesiveness. Now, a study was done that I've talked about before in other classes called the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect was a situation where a guy named Elton Mayo wanted to research how people in organizations worked when faced with adversity. And he went to a General Electric plant in Hawthorne, Pennsylvania, and studied how workers responded to their environment. And primarily he was looking at how they were doing their work on the assembly line, and each day he would lower the illumination in the building imperceptibly. I mean, you couldn't really tell one day to the next that the light was getting dimmer, but it was, and over a period of a long time, it became quite dim. The workers didn't seem to notice, but what Mayo wanted to find out was, in the face of obstacles, how workers would perform, and he originally thought that the workers would lower their productivity or reduce their productivity, but what he found was that they were working harder to adapt to or overcome the obstacle of lower illumination in the factory. Now, keep in mind, they didn't know all this was going on. They just kept working. So we found that out with the Hawthorne studies. But also, another important finding was he pitted the best producers against the ones who really struggled, and he wanted to see how competition affected performance. And he believed that the ones who were above board, the cream of the crop, would just decimate or outperform those who were slower and less productive. But what he found out was that when those who were the better producing people found out that the lower producing people were struggling to keep up, the better producing people decreased their output. And this is where we started to come to understand the idea of cohesion in the workplace. And cohesion is the extent to which members are attracted to the team and motivated to remain in it. This is the sense of teamwork and unity and identity that the team forms when they are in the workplace. Now, the key is that you want a performing team, one that is cohesive and so forth, but you don't want them so cohesive that they form their own little band. And if something happens to one, the whole team or the whole group or the whole company starts to become in disarray. So you want cohesion, but you don't want too much of it, in other words. Now, what determines cohesiveness? Well, team interaction. If you are following the principles that we saw yesterday, overcoming those dysfunctions, you're going to interact in a productive manner. And teams that are cohesive can do that. You have shared goals. Everybody knows that during the performing stage, that you have to accomplish that overarching objective or goal that the company has given you. So you start to come together out of the storming phase where you start to realize, hey, if we're going to get this done, we've got to work together. That's when you start sharing the goals and performing as such. You have a personal attraction to the team. Teams getting along is very important. Now, you're going to have conflict and differences of opinion and so forth, but to have an attraction to the team, to want to be there, is quite important too. The presence of competition. Now, competition can be bad if it becomes disruptive or dysfunctional. But there's nothing wrong with healthy competition, people performing and wanting to do a good job, and then team success. The more success you have, the more likely that team is going to be cohesive because you share in the victories, and then when failure comes, people tend to point fingers. So the more success you have, the more cohesive you're going to be. Now, some more consequences of cohesiveness. You have higher morale. Again, I mean, if you're doing what you should be doing and succeeding, your morale is going to be higher. You have increased communication among members, and that goes without saying. And I go back, I used yesterday the example of the football team. If a quarterback isn't calling the play and they just get up there and hike the football, no one's going to know what the order of responsibility or who should be doing what should take place. Are we going to run? Are we going to throw? Do I need to protect the quarterback a little bit more, or this, that, and the other? So communication is key. Having a friendly team environment, that's important. Maintenance of membership, making sure that your people are satisfied, they're working, you maintain that membership status with the team, and part of that is loyalty. If you're loyal to the team, you're going to be a part of it. You're going to want to contribute as much as you can, and then member participation in team decisions and activities. Those are all performance related issues where people are making decisions and activities. No one person is leading any of it, but each member participates in all of it, and they feel like they have a part in the decision-making and activity part of the team objective. Now, performance leads to greater productivity, better satisfaction, and you see here where you have greater employee energy and creativity. That's through empowerment, and that's another total quality management word. But you can have a decreased performance if you're not careful. Now, this term here, groupthink, is an important word. That's the tendency of people in cohesive groups to suppress contrary opinions. The best example that I can give you of that is actually two examples of the same outcome. If you remember the two space shuttles that blew up, both were the result of groupthink. The first one, I believe the first one was the Challenger. The Challenger was in Florida. They had been unable to launch in their original scheduled time because of weather. It was getting cold and so forth. And the engineers kept saying, no, you can't launch in cold weather. Well, after a while of scheduling and canceling and scheduling and canceling, NASA was under great pressure to launch, not only from a financial perspective, but the public wanted to see it, government wanted to see it, and NASA was struggling at the time to build back up their reputation because the space program had been in jeopardy for quite a while. People were starting to wonder, well, why should we invest in people going into space? What good is it going to serve us? So NASA was under tremendous pressure. Well, when the day came, or the day before the launch, the engineer said the same thing. We had a cold spell, and we're not sure the integrity of the spacecraft because of the cold weather will hold. We need to test everything and wait for warmer weather. But the executives at NASA, the decision makers, got them in a room and said, we can't tell you to approve or force you to approve this, but we just want you to know the pressure that we're under. And in other words, if we can't force you to say no, but if you do, your jobs may be in jeopardy. So they caved in. They said, okay, go ahead and launch. And you know what happened? The O-rings had become brittle because of the cold weather. And when they started to crack and that fuel mixed with the fire or the rockets, the whole thing blew up. The same thing happened with the second space shuttle, and the issue there was the seals, or not the seals, but the protective outer covering of the space shuttle. The engineers doubted their trustworthiness or integrity, and they were under pressure once again to launch. And as the shuttle was making its way back into orbit, it disintegrated. So groupthink is more than just a phenomenon that can hurt your business. It can also be very deadly depending on the situation that you're in. Now, team norm is an informal standard of conduct that is shared by team members and guides their behavior. Once you're together, you start to develop your own behaviors that are acceptable for that group or for that team. And it's really kind of like a culture. Your culture has certain behaviors and values and expectations of its members. So too does the team norm. And these are just the way that you behave. The military, we had formal rules, but we also had informal rules. The police department, fire department, they have formal rules, informal rules. Your organization probably has the same thing, but they're just ways of or behaviors that are expected of people if they're going to be a part of that team. Now you have two ways team norm develop. Primacy, the first behaviors. Usually what this means is that the first behaviors that are exhibited so that that team can evolve and survive are normally the behaviors that you're going to keep. And this goes back to the days of survivalists. When societies first formed, they had laws that they had to enact just so that the society could exist or survive as it was going up, and they adopted those. And then you have explicit leader statements, which are the expectations of the leader, and you have those demands and so forth. And combined, you have, as the slide indicates, the formation of team norms. Now you have team competencies. I'm not going to belabor this because of really the common knowledge that it brings. Team competencies, goal settings, and performance management. You need to be able to have milestones. You need to be able to have objectives and so forth, goals to set. And once you set it, you need to plan and coordinate those goals. So you go from the vision or the goal, how you're going to reach it, and then you plan and coordinate that. And then you have collaborative problem solving, which means when you come to areas that require decisions and so forth, or problem solving, you come together through that. And there are different types of problem solving. There are routine problem solving, there's non-routine problem solving, and we may talk about that here a little bit later on, but communication, we've talked about that, and conflict resolution. And I've already spoken a little bit about conflict, how it can be both warranted or unwarranted. And conflict that is warranted, you are really discussing or challenging ideas. Unwarranted is where you challenge the person personally, and that can lead to a lot of strife. Now, within the team, you have different roles. You have the task specialist role, which is to initiate ideas, give opinions, seek information, summarize, energize. All of these are focused on the task itself. What is the task, or what is the objective? You're there for this purpose. That's all you're there for. But now you also have the socio-emotional role, and these are the softer skills. These are the areas where you need to encourage, harmonize, reduce tension, and follow, and compromise sometimes. Now, I really don't like this word compromise. Now, the author has it, but what you want to have mainly is cohesion and consensus. Now, compromise means that I'm willing to give up a certain thing or things that are important to me. consensus is give and take. Well, I may not get everything, but I can live with what I do have. And what I have to give up, you can have. You can gain ground on. So consensus means I may not get everything, but I can live with what we have. Compromise means I'm going to have to give up a lot. I'm going to have to give up maybe important things and so forth. So the text says compromise, and we'll go with that. But normally what you want to reach in a team setting is consensus. That means everybody can live with the decision that your team has made. Virtual teams are the wave of the future. Today, many organizations are using a global strategy, and they're utilizing technology to bring this global community together to enact these strategies. A virtual team is a team made up of geographically or organizationally dispersed people who share a common purpose and are linked primarily through advanced information technologies. And we even see that in education today, where we are bringing people together from different areas of the world and putting them in one setting so that they can learn from each other and work together. A global team is just made up of globally diverse members who aid each other on activities and so forth. So you may have Ford North America, Ford Asia, Ford Middle East, and so forth, working together on a new type of technology for their automobiles and so forth. This is the difference between conventional, virtual, and global teams. I'll let you take a look at that, but really you have spatial distance, and then you have communications, member cultures, leader challenges, and so forth. So those are pretty straightforward. And then our final slide talks about the successful virtual team leader. Well, it goes without saying you need to have the right team members. These people aren't going to be micromanaged as much as you would if they were there with you physically. Start off right. Start off with an agenda. Start off with specific goals that are attainable and measurable. Use technology to build relationships and agree on ground rules. And that's true with any gathering of a team or team members and so forth. So as we go into a technology-rich environment, you'll see that a lot of these principles are the same, but they're just going to be applied in a different type of setting. No new rules, it's just a different application of those old rules that we need to remember. As we finish this section of Chapter 10, I want you to think about maybe a team that you've been a part of. How cohesive was it? How closely did you work together? What were some of the things that contributed to that cohesion? Was there a shared sense of identity? Did you all just get along? Was there conflict and so forth? But what is it that made your team special in as much as you were able to get the job done and you were able to perform collectively through the individual efforts? Well, these are some of the items and some of the concepts that you want to integrate into your leadership strategy as you go forth and manage teams. Well, that's all we have again for today. So tomorrow we'll finish up as we take a look at another pretty important aspect of team management and leadership. And we're going to take a look at conflict a little bit more and some more items. So you have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow.